Hello and welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and this is our continuing coverage of Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. And I am once again joined by my beautiful and brilliant co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all.
So I'm super pumped to have tonight's guest on. I've been trying to get Mark on. Melanie finally shared his email, so I shot him an email. I'm like, hey, man, come on. I want to talk to you. So I'm really excited about it. Mark's been just a real thought-provoking voice during, the first trial, the second trial, and all the time in between. He's got a great Twitter account, which we will be sharing throughout the live in the links. We'll throw that link in there a bunch of times, so make sure you follow him on Twitter. And I think that if you're following Karen, you know of Mark Bederow. If you don't know anything about him, he's a New York lawyer through and through, former prosecutor, came to the good side. He's a fellow defense attorney now. So, which I always love, because I love attorneys that have had experience on both sides of that aisle, because I think it can really enlighten you as a defense attorney as to kind of the inner workings, the heartbeat, what goes on in a prosecutor's office in terms of how decisions are made. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Hello, my friend. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday.
How are you? Nice to see you.
I'm awesome. So what's going on this lazy Sunday? You've been relaxing. I could see you're gearing up for the big game tomorrow night.
It's the Knicks. It's a big deal here in New York. They're very excited, probably for at least another week and a half anyway. Maybe a little. We'll see. But yeah.
What's your prediction on how long that series goes?
I mean, they swept them this year. They basically blew them out in 3 out of 4. The last game, they had already were locked into their seeding in the playoffs, and they still won. They dominated them last year as well. But it's the playoffs. The Knicks are tough. I'm gonna give them 1 game, maybe 2.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be a 4-1 type deal.
Yeah,
I don't they're never going to steal one at the Garden. Do they still call it the Garden, or is it
Boston? I mean, they do, but of course, in New York, they get very pissed off about the Garden. But the reality is, the Garden hasn't had any big games in 15 years. So
at least
the other Garden has the banners. So to me, that's the Garden.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I mean, growing up, it was always the Celtics and the Lakers. Man, that's what I watched. Yep. Until my boys came in, and you guys you guys were that one missing component during the Jordan years, because that was kind of a downtime for you. We caught the ass end of the Lakers still being relevant with Magic, but then it was and then we had that rivalry with the Pistons. But the Jordan years, it would have been cool, because I've always had a love for the Celtics, just because of what they stand for in the league, and they're just one of those legendary teams.
Yeah.
Where most of the times I hate legendary teams like the Cowboys and football. And I don't like them. I do hate your football team, though, I must tell you.
Well,
I was born out of winning,
It was a long time ago, but you had your way with our football team a long, long time ago on the big stage, and that was humiliating. But it worked out hats. Yeah.
Sadly, I still have to live like through that memory to this day with my Bears, my beloved Bears. It's been a long, long dry spell. So, but we'll see. We'll see. I feel like we won the off season again, which means nothing, but we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out next season.
Yeah.
So, all right, man, let's dig into it. As far as 2.0 goes.
Well, let's first start by letting people know, because Mark represents Aiden Carney, he cannot, the professional rules of ethics, dictate you can't talk about an open criminal case that's going on. So we're not going to cross that at all, even though there's certain things he may be able to talk about, may not. We're just going to strictly stick to Karen Reed.
Yeah, as much as I want to, because I think y'all know how important I think Aiden's case
Me
is.
Too.
Well,
Me
yeah,
too.
obviously. I mean, if you threw your hat in the ring, on a pro hawk, you knew it had to mean something to you to get in there into the fight. And you're a constitutionalist, much like Allie and I. So I respect the hell out of that move, and I'm glad you're in there with Bradel. I think you guys make a formidable team, because that's going to be a very, very important trial, which I hope gets the attention it needs, because I don't think people understand. They kind of get caught up in the minutia of what's causing it and not looking at the bigger picture. It's just exactly how critical that is to our rights as citizens in this country moving forward. It's a watershed case, truly, in my estimation. So, but yeah, we'll as much as I want to dig into it, we'll avoid it. So what are we 8 days in? What's your, give me your kind of your thumbnail analysis of where we're at right now.
I think it's been pretty bumpy for the prosecution, most particularly because they've already called two of their most significant witnesses. And I think, blood was drawn on cross-examination, both from the expert Ian Whiffen and Jennifer McCabe, and certainly some of the other peripheral witnesses, if you will, supportive witnesses have also been damaged to some extent. So, as you well know, prosecution in their case in chief, they should be ahead. I mean, it's never going to get better for them than when they're controlling the narrative, controlling the evidence. And, as it stands 8 days in, as far as I can tell, the best evidence they've presented are these potentially out of context video clips of Karen, which may or may not be interesting depending on where the rest of the case goes, particularly the science, and whether those videos are ever put in context by the defense. And they'll certainly have the opportunity to do that. So, I mean, candidly, I'm not that impressed yet. I think Ian Whiffen in particular needed to be one of those so-called knockout witnesses, because when you get to like the Google search and all these other issues, did the phone go in the house? When you're talking about reasonable doubt, those are issues the prosecution can't just maybe, possibly, probably. They have to convincingly knock out the defense. And it feels to me that damage was done to him without even the defense putting up an expert yet. So that's problematic. And, in addition to contradicting the prosecution expert, the defense expert also is going to do, I imagine, some pretty serious damage to Jennifer McCabe. I mean, in light of everything you heard her say, and we could go on for hours about that, he's going to get up and say she made over 4,500 Google searches on her phone. And as far as I could tell, only one was deleted. Want to guess which one? And even the prosecution expert said, well, maybe 4 or 5 were deleted, but call it 1, call it 4, call it 5. If everyone is in agreement that 5 out of 4,500 were deleted, and one of them is Hoslong to die in the cold, but not the other ones, and that's a big deal to me. Not the other ones that allegedly came later. Only the 227 one, because remember, there's a couple of permutations of the search. With all the other issues that are going to come out from the defense expert, including that she deleted all of these phone calls and all of these other text messages, and all of it seems to stop right about 9 o'clock in the morning on January 29th, right around the time when they called the police back, when they had the epiphany about, oh yeah, I remember the taillight and I hit him and all of that stuff. So, to me, it's been a pretty bumpy rollout for them.
Now, when you talk about Ian Whiffen, one of the things you may recall from the first trial is he called it a spontaneous deletion, said he could not recreate the deletion. Now, they did get into the fact that he couldn't recreate it. He gave 3 or 4 possibilities, which speaks to, like you were saying, him laying his own framework for reasonable doubt. Why I thought it was strange that they didn't really focus on his previously calling it a spontaneous deletion and sort of poking at that a little bit. Do you think that that was intentional, that they avoided the term spontaneous deletion, or you think, you know what, that didn't really mean much anyway?
I don't know. I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't even know what they were thinking as it relates to that. But so many points were scored, again, from the context of just possible doubt. It could be, maybe. And I think from the defense perspective that, they establish enough and then you get the hell out of there, right? You've done what you need to do. You have so much more you're going to use. I mean, you have medical experts that are going to testify that John O'Keefe was incapacitated at the time. Ian Whiffen has John O'Keefe opening the phone with his face and manipulating the phone. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So to me, I thought the cross of him was very effective. Maybe does the jury know it now? They may not. But again, come summation time, I mean, you can be damn well sure they're going to know, because that's something they're going to drive home repeatedly, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, the other part of it is that now that Bob is on the team and he's just so brilliant with these science and tech background experts, man. I mean, like, what a quality add to the team. I mean, like, just being able to plug and play Bob Alessi in for these types of witnesses, he's going to be prepared and he's going to know all of the information forwards and backwards in terms of his cross, but that's also going to translate into when they call their experts, when Green's on the stand during direct. I think he's going to be able to create a more fluid flow that I think is able to get because I walked away from trial one not knowing whether or not the 227 Google search happened definitively one way or the other. That's how I felt. I'm like, I'm relying, and, I've employed experts for many, many years in our cases, and I know how that game goes. You know what I mean? But in terms of kind of that type of data, you'd hope that somebody would have a definitive answer. And I think that where that thing lies, because there's just no way to know what Apple's secret sauce is in terms of whether or not that actually happened. I don't know that we'll ever get a definitive answer in terms of what the jury is going to think, because what we all think, like, we all have formed our opinions. Allison and I are both, we believe that Karen's factually innocent. So, like, where my head's always going from the lawyer side of it is like, how would I be trying this case? Like, what kind of things would I do differently? What do I think is hitting? What do I think is missing? And I want to get into some of that with you, but I think that having Alessi is so huge moving forward, and being able to not only pick apart Whiffen, I thought, pretty effectively. But I think what he's going to be able to do with their own witnesses is really what you're talking about. That's when you hope that it will land with the jury that Whiffen was just off base.
Yeah. So I think adding Bob is kind of a double whammy for the prosecution and a double benefit for the defense. The first is the obvious one you just mentioned, which is he's just a scientific minded, linear thinking, widgets, gadgets, get me to the next play. He's just good at that.
Yep.
And he's just always going to be smarter than anyone dealing with that. But there's another benefit, and this, especially when you try any kind of high stakes case that can go on for months and it's long, and he frees up Alan and David to do a lot more of the blood and guts and get in there with the sharp elbows and, the street fighting type of witnesses. Whereas in the first trial, I mean, they were having to deal with all of this at the same time, and now they're not. So I think that's, very important just in terms of the ebb and flow and the stamina required, the mental stamina, physical stamina to do a trial. The other thing with all the things that Bob did, you know, at the very end of that cross, there was a really interesting point to me that stuck out. And again, you look at it through the lens of reasonable doubt. You know, Whiffen is 1,000% confident in his mind there was no search, and that's fine. No, you know, that's his opinion, and he's sticking to it, as they say. But at the same time, he acknowledged that opinion essentially comes from, you know, a formula that he came up with
Right.
that had Celebrite add, and that's only the first part. The real part is there are other manufacturers, competitors who are every bit as credible and reliable as Celebrite, and yes, they still find that this was a 2:27 a.m. search. Axiom, I think, was the one he's talking about.
Yeah, Magnet.
And so we're talking about reasonable doubt, and what's left in the jury's mind is, well, this guy could be right, but he's also saying here's a great company that's every bit as credentialed as Celebrite, and you know they're saying the opposite. With everything else going on, how in the hell do you ever get beyond a reasonable doubt? And this is a week into the trial. I mean, that's
right.
And the Google search, to me, the way I mean, this is a must-have issue for the prosecution, in the sense that if the Google search was made at 2:27 a.m., pack up your bag and go home.
Over.
It's over. I mean, it can't. And for the defense, it's kind of a house money issue, meaning they want the issue, obviously, but even if they were to lose it emphatically in the eyes of the jury, they've got a lot more. They're still well in the game. But if they muck it up, they're going to win too. And I mean, I don't know how you walk out of there 1,000%, you know, satisfied, even before the defense expert comes up and talks about any of these number of things that, you know, she didn't do it. And I think she also, McCabe, damaged it with some of her testimony, playing games, saying, I don't remember making any search at 2:27 a.m. or using Safari or anything like that. You know, after 3 years of this, I mean, this issue has been 3 years of the case, maybe 2 years of the Google search being literally talked about as national news. For her to say, I don't know what was going on at 2:27, she did make a search. She made, I mean, that's their whole argument. She made a different search, and that window opened later. And for her to carry on these shenanigans that I don't even remember making any search just strikes me as, I mean, it's probably not a first world problem with her credibility problems, but, you know, just one of these things that if you're a juror, you throw your hands up and you say, can you just tell me without the nonsense what happened and what didn't? And that struck me as disingenuous.
Yeah, and I mean, at best, disingenuous.
Yeah, right. And to your point, when she did the whole well, I don't know what you're talking about. That can you show me this 2:27 thing, whatever you're talking about? And Alan Jackson's like, ma'am, you've been asked about this numerous times. This has been a very public issue, you know, like it definitely carried over the jury. Like, okay, she's just played stupid. Like, not buying it.
Do you really think she hasn't watched over the years Aiden's shows where he's sitting there in this T-shirt that has Google and says Hosslong to die in the cold, and all these people are walking? I mean, you know, you guys are in Chicago, I understand, but you know, if you come out to the people that are running around Norfolk County, Massachusetts, they're all running around in, you know, these Google Hosslong to die in the cold shirts.
Created a brand.
There was something else she was asked. I can't remember what it was right now, where she was like, no, do you know about, you know, just even the theory that Karen broke her taillight backing out of the driveway? And she's like, oh, I've never heard that before.
And that's the thing about this case, right? So all three of us sitting right here, we know that in terms of that town, in terms of that region, that you cannot breathe without hearing something about this case. So we have to go in assuming that these jurors have some knowledge basis about the facts of this case. How in depth it is, I guess that's what's up for debate, but all of them know something about this case. We have to assume that. So
certainly it would be absurd to think otherwise. I think
it would be insane. So, you know, when you have, and this is one of the things that I wanted to kind of get into, like, I have been huge and this goes back to probably the motion to dismiss it when it was litigated before the first trial. I've always felt that when they
you call that litigated, huh? That motion.
Yeah. I mean, when they like all the way back then, when I heard about them getting these two gifts from God known as Wolf and Rensselaer, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you can, if you're trying a case in either the civil world or the criminal world, and you get these two witnesses that are truly independent, and I don't give a shit what Hank Brennan says. I don't care what Cannone said. Those guys were independent because the testing and the report was all done before anybody knew they existed. Period. End of that ends the story for me. So, but when you get those two guys, I've been in the mindset, if my job to Karen Reed is to get, because I believe her as her attorney to be factually innocent, which puts a lot more pressure on us as attorneys when you believe that. Not to say that we're not always going to the mat for our clients.
No, that's
internally
losing sleep. That's,
yeah. I mean, because
in your life. Yeah, no, I get it.
It's everything. So
blessing
my thing has always been, I'm leaning into the science. I'm leaning into the timeline that you can prove. And like Allie and I have this debate all the time. She's like, well, how are you dealing with the taillight? I'm like, all right, then we throw Proctor in. We can have Proctor planting the taillight and avoid all the rest of it. As much as I understand the concept, if those people in that house did this, there should be a reckoning. I get it. But what I don't know is when Karen Reed's life is on the line, if this is the place to try to prove it, because I worry that it might affect that jury in terms of coming to a full not guilty. Where are you at on that?
Burden shifting, you mean, in the eyes of the jury?
Yeah,
I mean, it is a de facto burden shifting.
In terms of the whole third-party culprit issue, to me, it's kind of a red herring, and they have to be careful to not go too far down the rabbit hole, because I think, to Allie's point, you run the risk of the jury then having a referendum on, well, who did it and, whatnot. And to me, this case on a reasonable doubt standard is very straightforward and very simple, and why I don't think there could ever be a conviction. And it starts with the science. I mean, if you have the ARCA witnesses and they're credible, and let's forget about the nonsense that they're, conspiring with the defense and the federal government to screw Michael Morrissey. I mean, the tinfoil hat is on the other head here, right? With the way that people claim there's crazy conspiracy theories. So if these guys come out with a straight face, as they have, and say, look, the condition of the car doesn't match the condition of John O'Keefe and vice versa, therefore we're satisfied with all of our biomechanical engineering and kinetics and God knows whatever else they have degrees, that this doesn't make sense to us. If you start from that, then, the argument to the jury starts with, look, Karen didn't do it. And if you're able to say, we know she didn't do it, I don't know who did it. And instead of saying, the example I use when they talk about, Colin Albert or Brian Albert in the basement, Colonel Mustard with the candlestick in the conservatory, forget all that. Just say, look, the evidence shows she didn't do it. I don't know who did, but what I can tell you is this: there's a lot of weird shit going on.
Right.
I don't know what they did or didn't do, and I'm not here to tell you what it is, but their behavior is not consistent with what they're portraying in court, which is, we're victims and that's just my friend and all we care. And, Brennan, he made this front and center in a huge mistake on redirect, which led to recross the other day, because Jennifer McCabe is trying to sell this story of, I couldn't function. This was like, and people can understand if they believe her that would be true. Your friend is dead in front of you. You have this misfortune. And so he introduces all those messages, which were completely inadmissible, but that's another story.
Right.
With, her friend, Kerry Roberts, and other people, where she's talking about, I just want to throw up. I can't live. The very same day, she was privately communicating in the family, the inner sanctum. And what are they talking about? They're talking about something totally different. They're talking about things that don't make sense. We can't be talking on text. We'll get more information tomorrow. She's
Right.
telling them everything. Tell them the man didn't go in the house. Exactly. And this was all an own goal by Brennan, and let Jackson explain. You don't have to believe that stuff. Look what's going on behind the curtain. These people are actively worrying about who knows what and what's being told to the cops and trying to stay, 3 steps in front of the investigation. So if you have all of that, to go back to the larger point about the third party culprit, if you have the science, then if there's no car accident, to me, that requires another irrefutable point, which is this: the taillight pieces, 45 of them, can only have been there one of 2 ways. What I would call the natural way from a car accident,
Right.
or the unnatural way, which is, as hard as it is to believe, somebody put it there. And they don't have to prove it. But if the science doesn't support it naturally shattering in that way, well, then it had to have been put there. And you say, well, wait a minute, that's crazy. And then you say, well, okay, Michael Proctor.
Right.
And the inverted video.
Corrupt to his core. I mean, terminated for his conduct in this case, including being biased against Karen. Okay. Does the timeline fit? It actually does. That it could get there. There's going to be evidence later that when they searched and found the initial taillight pieces, that there were 5 unaccounted for non-state police people that were there. Well, who were they? I don't know.
No one knows.
Because these dopes don't document it, because they were the wrong team. They're supposed to use the crime scene unit, but this Brian Tully, who's, got his own issues, called out a different unit. So who found what? We don't know. Okay, well, they found 3 pieces of taillight. That's problematic. Why didn't they find the rest? And then you come to learn because Brian Tully said, time to go. We're done. You're going to see evidence that the search guy says, well, we only found 3 pieces. You want us to come out tomorrow when it's daylight? And Tully says, we're good. No worries. We're good. Well, where's the rest of the taillight? It reveals itself over the course of the next 2 weeks, because
as the snow melts.
The snow will melt. No one's watching the scene. You don't know what's going on. I mean, so it becomes totally plausible that the taillight could be there. Then you get into all those weird text messages, the Google search, the butt dials, all this other stuff. The fact that Jen McCabe lied to the FBI, why? I mean, another ridiculous mistake by Brennan on redirect. When the cops came, you told them the truth, you cooperated, you went to the grand jury. Yeah, when it's your incestuous Canton cabal, you're cooperative. But when the feds come and all they want to do is say, listen, we're trying to find out what's going on with John O'Keefe, your instinct was to lie, go in the house, make a series of panic phone calls to everyone, and then lie about it. Explain that.
Right.
There's no explanation for that.
There is none.
No, and that was the
go ahead, babe.
I was just gonna say, and starting off her testimony with that, letting the jury know this is someone who's got no bones about lying. She's got no bones about being shady and lying. She's about to do it to you. And we talked about it because a big part of what everyone was saying about her testimony first time around was how she'd be like, well, to be honest, blah, 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 blah. If I'm going to be honest, blah, 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 blah.
That's code word for not really. Right.
And she caught herself in about this topic specifically. And she said, well, and she literally stopped speaking and changed her what she was going to say. She followed that up. The next sentence, she couldn't help herself. I'll be completely honest. I had to brush my teeth. Well, everyone's thinking you had 10 minutes. You made all these phone calls. I don't even know if you had time to brush your teeth. But starting with that and letting the jurors know, this is someone who's got no bones about lying. But then, circling into how she caught herself saying that and the difference that you saw in her on both direct and cross, do you think she's like working with like actual experts, just doing this over and over again with her police officer family members? I mean, she seems to have put in time adjusting her demeanor and the way she answered questions. Do you get that sense?
Completely. I mean, look, not that I put much stock in this, but she showed up with a complete, blowout of her hair and a tan. I mean, no, I mean, whatever. That
It
doesn't
looked
mean
good. It looked good. It was a good,
but it's
solid.
noticeable. I mean, you notice right out of the gate, and her demeanor was vastly improved from the first trial. I mean, the first trial, she was fighting and needling and punching at every chance. And I actually appreciate what Alan did about, did somebody tell you to say I'm sorry repeatedly? Because, I've noticed that a lot. But at the end of the day, demeanor aside, but when summation comes and the jury is reminded that you're dealing with a witness who is adamant, I mean, this is just one example, that her bottom line is, I heard Karen Reed say, I hit him at the scene, and I told the cops from every police department, I told the grand jury, I told the trial, and she's going to die on that hill no matter what you say. And she's saying, I remember that. And it turns out, and I lost count, but there were at least the responding officer from the Canton police who hasn't testified yet, but we know what he said at the last trial. There's a Sergeant Good, there's a Sergeant Lank. So that's 3 Canton police officers who interviewed her who are going to say, I would have documented that. I didn't do that. If they do the, impeachment through them properly. You have, Michael Proctor, who's going to say whatever he said in his report doesn't match. You have Brian Tully on more than one occasion about 2 different issues is going to contradict what she said. The grand jury transcript doesn't bear out what she said. The trial transcript doesn't bear out what she said. And, you have a lot of people, because this case is so crazy and brings out the lunatics, as you know, who just refuse to acknowledge this point. And, what I tried to say to them was, forget it's this case. Just wipe out the names. It's person. Right. And if I told you in any given case about a boring pettit larceny case, right, that this witness lied to the FBI and claims that she said something that no less than 7 police officers, a grand jury transcript, and a trial transcript will not corroborate and in fact will contradict, would you find that witness credible? And there isn't a sane person in the world who would say, yeah, I don't have a reason to doubt what that witness is telling me. But if you're one of these, Karen is guilty and is the reason for cancer and global warming and all of that, they're going to just believe it no matter what. But I mean, her credibility is just awful. And that's without even getting into her story. I mean, she's kind of chameleon-like, kind of like a shapeshifter. The first trial, the prosecution's theory was that the car accident was at 12:45. That's right. Based on her. That comes exclusively from her. And you actually heard a snippet from the last boring witness on Friday about the alcohol. What was the time of incident? 12:45. I can't wait for the cross of that. She'll just say that's what they told me when it happened.
Right.
And that's because she said under oath, I saw the car at 12:45 when I sent my last text. So now, they're moving it to 12:31. They prep her for trial. And here she comes with this ridiculous story that, well, I remember sending the text around 12:31, but all the other stuff that happened after, I have no clue, no memory. I don't deny saying it, but I don't remember. I don't know. Maybe the car wasn't there. You factor all of this together, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
Who is believing her about anything? And then she has the gall at the end to say, basically, I'm the reason why there's no federal investigation because, never mind the fact that I lied to the feds. In the 5 minutes I spoke to them before I said I don't want to talk to you anymore, consciousness of guilt, anyone, in light of what Brennan is arguing, that I'm somehow responsible for them killing their investigation. I mean, this is supposed to be their star witness.
Yeah, and the thing about all of these witnesses, and I think that people need to understand, I think fundamentally deep down they do understand, none of these witnesses that were in that house that night are going to cave on the stand, right? So none of that's not happening. So
no Perry Mason. That's not how it works.
It's not. We're not getting that Perry Mason moment. So Alan did exactly what he had to do in terms of starting it out with that. That Fed lie to me was so big in terms of, because if you're a juror sitting there thinking about it during deliberations, you're thinking about her testimony, and you're putting yourself in that position of being Jen McCabe on that morning when they knock on your door and they're asking you questions. I mean, it's a big move to lie to the feds knowingly, because we're talking about a half an hour time frame. She didn't forget shit.
No,
right?
no, she clearly,
to the feds.
Totally. But even worse than that, I mean, obviously lying to the feds is bad, but her testimony does not give her any reasonable basis to even do so, because the whole basis of her being credible is, I'm a victim. I found my friend. We had nothing to do with this, all this stuff, which begs the question, then why, when law enforcement comes, would you just not tell them what you know? Her instinct was to deflect, panic, and lie. That makes no sense. And the way that Alan did it in the first half hour of cross was brilliant, because the first thing he did, almost like the structure that the feds would use of an organized crime family, which I'm not suggesting they are, but he laid out the incestuous Canton connections between the McCabes and Alberts and the power structure, the police department, the select board. They're all related by marriage and this small town. And then once you establish that, you know she's going to be comfortable with the Canton police and all that. 5 minutes later, you learn she lied to the outsider investigators. And right then and there, everything she says is through the lens of, yeah, but why did you lie to the feds? There's no reason.
Right.
So that, I thought that was brilliant.
The
organizational structure of it.
Right.
And I thought it was a powerhouse way to start out that entire, what we knew was going to be a lengthy cross. And I think just kind of establishing and be able to nail her to the cross on that point where there was no wiggle room for her.
Right.
You know, I mean, like Alan knew going into that he had her dead to rights on that one. And there's not going to be anything that she could say that's going to make it go away. Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. So I wanted to ask you, like, the statement that Cannone made, I was so, and look, Mark, Allison and I have been, getting our heads handed to us by, judges on benches for decades, right? I mean, we know, I mean, defense, right? I mean, that's where we live. It's like, I'm never shocked by it. I think we're more prone to know that that's kind of, you get a lot of stateside judges. That's just the nature of the beast. And they're going to rule in the Commonwealth of the state's favor a majority of the time. So like we're accustomed to it. I don't know that the general public is, but when she literally called out Alan, when she said that thing about, I just want to remind you, jurors, that the words that come out of attorneys' mouths are not evidence. And I want you to keep that in mind right now. I had never seen anything like that in the middle of a jury trial.
Neither have I. I mean, we always talk about these things called ouch objections from parties who, seem to object because they're just getting pummeled and don't know what to do. And it's a panic objection and you just do it. And I think Brennan did it once or twice. But what I've never seen is an ouch judicial ruling, basically trying to throw what appeared to be a lifeline and let the jury know this is not something you should be thinking, when clearly the witness was getting pummeled. And if it was proper to sustain an objection, that she should do so. But what the last thing the judge should be doing in real time is editorializing that, don't you dare think of this. And if I don't allow an answer, this never happened, in the way that she gave it. I mean, if she sustains the objection, I get it. But there are too many times where the judge in this case is editorializing. I mean, she does it with her rulings. I've said this before. The purpose of an objection to a judge, it's a legal question, right? A party is objecting. The judge should make a legal ruling. And 90% of the time, she punts it to the witness. Can you answer that? Basically saying, we're going to let you make a factual ruling, and whatever your answer is, we'll live with. And of course, it's suggestive when she says that. So the manner in which she's dealing with legal rulings in real time, I think is regrettable. The way she huffs and puffs and says, no more questions or move along. That's editorializing. You saw that with Nuttall, where he would not give up, that the video did not depict what it ought to have depicted if you heard Karen say, I hit him. This is kind of a big point, whether it's annoying or not, and he was being tough. And the lawyer has a right to fight on and extract the evidence. And she basically told him to stop. And he said, I can't. I need to do this. But the jury sees that. They hear that, and it's not appropriate. And it's happened a lot of times.
Yeah. I mean, she did it with the refreshing recollection, which was just totally wrong. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it was during I think it was Jen McCabe. And the judge asked her if it, like they were trying to refresh her recollection. And then the judge sort of chimed in and said, did that refresh your recollection? And she said, no. And the judge said, that's it, move on. And didn't even give him a chance to, sort of delve into it to establish what he's asking, and that there is some room for, refreshing her recollection. And like you said, she did it a lot. And she did it with, when they put on the text messages from Jen McCabe, she instructed the jury, this is not to be accepted for the truth of the matter. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. All those text messages came in last time, and she did it multiple times. Then when they came back from the break, she did it again, or on redirect, she did it again. I'm like, what is happening here? And that's like what you're saying. It's a signal. We're not saying, look, first of all, Mark has to be very cautious. He is practicing in Massachusetts, and the rules are very control how we can criticize a judge and to what level we can criticize a judge. So Bob and we can criticize a lot more. I saw a question over here from Little Miss Velvet saying, could you ask Mark what he thought about Brennan and Bev's silent signals with Dr. Wolf? I don't want to get Mark tied up with challenging the integrity of a judge.
No, I mean, I saw the video. It's weird. It's weird to say beyond that. It appears to me, I'm not drawing conclusions, but it appears to me that the man's head does move in a no, and there's a reaction. I don't know. More disturbing to me than even that was a video I saw and heard the other day where Jen McCabe was getting cross-examined. You can clearly hear Brennan say, take it easy. And then you actually hear the judge say, excuse me, as if, so she heard it too. And then he objected. And, some people are saying, was he coaching Jen McCabe? And I don't know, again, but I mean, if you watch that video, I don't know how else you interpret it, to be honest with you. You clearly hear Brennan say, take it easy. You hear the judge say, excuse me. And then you hear him say, oh, objection, or something like that. And
I mean, and that's that setup in that courtroom.
That's outrageous, right?
I have never, ever seen, literally.
Have you been in that courtroom? Have you been in there?
No.
It's smaller than your bathroom. Okay. It is the case of the century, if you will, is being tried in just a ridiculously sized courtroom, because they have a very nice courtroom there. The jury can't see. Not all the jurors can see. And if you saw, for example, like you were talking about Jen McCabe's physical demeanor and whatnot, it's more important to see that. But the cost of doing business is they're trying the case in this closet.
And Allison and I, just for example, if we're in trial, we will literally stand in front of the witness so that they cannot see the prosecutor.
When they're doing that, when they're doing a lot of looking over,
that the witness is looking over to the prosecutor for an answer, we'll literally move in front of them. To have the prosecuting attorney sitting inches away from the witness on the stand is so bizarre to me. I can't even fathom that type of situation.
It's horrible. And, the spectator part of the courtroom where the O'Keefe family is sitting is hovering over the defense table. They are literally staring at the jury. And if you know, at the last trial, Brian Albert showed up, and along with Jen McCabe and Colin Albert. And, Brian Albert is, a big, thick-necked, intimidating-looking guy.
Yeah.
And, one of the jurors gave an interview and said that was intimidating. And, people look at it and say it's like a Frank Pentangeli situation, right? When
That's exactly what I called it. It's
when
exactly
he's about to testify in front of the Senate Committee on organized crime, and here comes his brother from Sicily, and he's like,
walking right in.
I'm out of here, That's the courtroom. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't
And
even.
that's the kind of thing, like, I would hope she didn't need to obviously, say something right there. She could have actually said, I want you guys to approach, and admonished Brennan, because like you said, she heard it. She said, excuse me. I kind of missed it. And then someone in the chat said, did you hear whatever? And like, I was going to rewind it, but I thought that couldn't have been what was said. And then I just kept rolling.
And Allie's all over hot mic moments. I mean, she, like, when we're streaming the trial, she's like, shut up. I think I heard a hot mic moment.
He definitely said, take it easy. And I suppose if anybody cared, the only defense they would have is that he's like, yelling at Lally to put the pencils down before you're going to hurt yourself. And maybe he should take it easy. I mean,
right.
if it wasn't that, who else could he be speaking to? And it's obvious the judge heard it. Okay. It's obvious the judge heard it, because she said, excuse me, as if she was almost stunned by what she heard. But again, I don't know what it was. Nobody complained. Who knows? But it was weird.
It was definitely weird. And I mean, I think we all realized at the time that we hope that Cannone has grave concerns about anything the Commonwealth has done or will do in the future. We're never going to get that moment, and it's one of those things, like, Mark, Allie and I came out of real heavy duty coverage of this Delphi case, this Richard Allen case. And, I was at every hearing for that. I was making the drive. I was sitting in the courtroom. I was watching this Judge Gall. And so I was coming out of that, like, shell shocked at what this judge had done or not done. And, I had already, and that took place after Karen Reed Part 1. So we're then coming into Karen Reed Part 2. And I'm like, are my goggles too cloudy because of Gull that I'm not seeing? Like, because, like, believe it or not, Cannone seems somewhat even-handed compared to Gull, because Gull was she did things that I've never seen a trial judge do ever. And it went on for 2 years, and I'm talking pre-trial hearings or the lack thereof. She just wouldn't keep a proper docket. It was like everything about that case was unbelievable. So in your estimation, and I'm obviously cognizant, I don't want you to kind of hammer away on Cannone, but do you think that she's calling balls and strikes? Or, I mean, clearly she's stateside. We all know that. But in terms of, like, do you think that she's been fair at all in terms of calling balls and strikes?
What I can tell you is this: the public perception is no. I mean, the people who watch this notice things. I mean, there's the examples are too many to count, but an obvious one is the prosecution had the gall to allege that they were substantially prejudiced by not getting discovery related to ARCA, and they're having these tantrums and all kinds of remedies need to be sought. And what the judge basically did, without really taking any evidence, concluded that the defense attorneys were guilty, and said publicly, knowing everyone was watching, knowing that jury summonses were out, that I basically find that you deliberately withheld evidence and then deliberately lied about it. I mean, that's a double whammy of bad. And that was, as you can imagine, the front page news in that county and all around Boston then. And then you ask yourself, if she really believes that, why didn't she kick them off the case, refer them for disciplinary? I mean, that's serious stuff. I think you're lying, and I think you suppress. I mean, you're not worthy of belief. But as this argument by Brennan goes on and on, so what does she do? Well, in the middle of trial, we have to have a hearing to determine this. and any lawyer, who follows this, I'm sure you as well, was saying, there's no way she's keeping these witnesses out because,
Not a chance.
it's still America. You still have a right to present a defense and exculpatory witnesses. And moreover, to the extent she wants to, crap on the attorneys, even then, all that's doing would be setting up an ineffective assistance of counsel successful appeal, because why do I suffer because my attorneys did this and this was the remedies. I mean, this was never going to happen. But she has this full-fledged hearing and lets Brennan just act like a clown. I mean, at that hearing, he's swinging from the chandeliers, running around like a lunatic, screaming and yelling, pounding the histrionics, the gesticulating, all of it. And she's fine with that, whatever. You go back to two things that stick out. During the first trial, there was an issue. I think it was related to probably either Dr. Russell or the ARCA people. I don't remember. And the defense wanted to make a record without the jury in the room. And it was David who wanted to make an argument. He was pretty pissed off, rightfully so, if I recall correctly. And within 30 seconds of his argument, he's cut off, and she says, there's no jury here. Can we stop with the theatrics? And then you look at the stuff that you saw last week. But the larger point is, so there's this big hearing on ARCA. They're never getting excluded. And you juxtapose that against the motion to dismiss. Okay? And in the motion to dismiss, you have the prosecution admitting that we, meaning all of them, did not disclose the video. Okay. And then they take this really weak, in my view, weak character approach by saying, we're going to make Proctor the patsy and the useful idiot and say, but it was his fault, knowing that legally that has no impact. If the police suppress it, it's you. So, but there are all these undiscovered issues that could have led to intentional misconduct, which would have been required for the defense to get what they wanted, the dismissal. They had to show there was this egregious misconduct. The prosecution doesn't submit any sworn statements disputing anything they say. They offer nothing even in their brief affidavit, if you will. There are all these unresolved factual questions. This screamed for a lengthy evidentiary hearing, findings of fact, a decision, and whatnot. But the problem was, April 1st. And if we don't start the trial on April 1st, we're all going to turn into pumpkins.
Right.
It always felt like with this judge, that was the line in the sand, and everything else came second to that. So there was no hearing. And then even later, when they started having all these dauber motions going back and forth, you remember all the hard time the defense got on these really credentialed experts. Don't even care about the opinion, their credentials, whether they're qualified to testify. They were put through the ringer, right? But it's getting close to April 1st, and the prosecution's offering all of these experts that have serious issues, and we're not even doing hearings anymore because it's going to. And the only reason I could think of is because April 1st.
Yeah.
So the public's view, they see all of this. You wonder why people have no confidence in law enforcement in Norfolk County. They don't trust Michael Morrissey. They don't trust the court. These are the reasons why.
Yeah.
And we've said a million times, like, how she lets that inverted video go without ever admonishing the Commonwealth is beside. It's your courtroom.
No.
They tried to pull the wool over that jury and you.
This I remember specifically discussing when this happened in real time, which was, I don't remember who I was talking to about this on one of these streams, in real time, if you will. And they said, what's going to happen? And I said, what I think is going to happen is that they're going to clear the jury and someone on the defense is going to have a stroke. Okay. They are going to literally shake the foundations, and that we are in real mistrial land. Okay. Right. It was disclosed belatedly. It was, essentially not represented to be what it was. The prosecutor elicited testimony, which in my view clearly was suborning perjury.
100%.
And the witness who answered the questions clearly gave perjured testimony. And as you know, once he learned what was going on, he walked away. Oh, I'm not sure that was me. I don't know. And so I thought for sure, and you can only go, we don't know the Massachusetts culture. Neither do I. I mean, I'm from there, but not legally. And, what I was saying was, if this was in a courtroom in Manhattan and this happened in the middle of trial, the judge would kick out the jury. And before you could even argue, as the defense would say, sit down, the judge would look at the prosecutor and say, what the hell is happening in my courtroom?
Yes.
And tell me exactly why I'm not calling a mistrial. And by the way, that you caused.
Right.
So
With
when
prejudice.
That's right. So when you talk about like manifest necessity and all of that this is going to be it. And you can appeal otherwise. But why am I not, dismissing this right or mistrialing this right now and ordering a hearing about whether I am going to find it with prejudice and all of that? And in this case, it was as if the court was just, what's for lunch?
Right.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well, I was shocked at the time that the defense didn't ask for a mistrial. And Bob and I spoke about this a lot, that we felt the defense wanted so badly to prove her innocence, to get that not guilty, that they let a huge mistrial issue just rest there and didn't do anything. Because you could have argued that even like on top of all the other intentional things, everything you just said, that this was done for the purpose of either getting a mistrial or having the jury hung, like that, because there's something weird in Massachusetts, like they have to have done this misconduct for the purposes of causing a mistrial or for the purposes of, of something. But we were floored. And then, we were talking about it on the appeal issues when they filed for the double jeopardy thing, that they could have figured out a way to roll this in, especially under also the fact that there was, two very clearly possible reasonable explanations, one that was innocent, one was guilty, and that should have also barred a retrial.
I don't know why it wouldn't be a mistrial application. And I mean, if that didn't happen, I have no explanation for why that would not have happened. But, there are so many bizarre coincidences, the missing ring video, which would show the condition of the taillight, the missing library video, the missing this, everything's missing. But what makes the inverted video so bad, and it's just too much to believe in any of this stuff, is it just conveniently concealed the actual condition of the right rear taillight, which of course is the whole freaking case, but represented and as an added bonus by having it in the other way, it also conceals the presence of Michael Proctor, who is standing right next to the right rear taillight doing, I don't know, who the hell knows. But the point is,
he was close.
He's off camera. The taillight is off camera. And his supervisor, who, liked all his comments on the text messages, got up there with a straight face. And remember how arrogant he was? He was sitting on the stand, kind of leaning like this. Yeah. Sergeant Buchanan, he was very calm, cool customer there, saying that this is basically an accurate video of, when the car was brought into the Sally Port. It was very crafty, too cute questioning, but the implication was obvious. And he just turned into a ghost on cross when this came out. And the people that he identified as himself and Michael Proctor a day before, he no longer was willing to identify and was saying, I did not say it, when he's like, I just froze the video where you identify them on direct. And it honestly,
it was unbelievable.
Disgusting. It's whether you think, she's guilty, she's not guilty. It's got to be fair. The prosecutor has to wear the white hat. Just do it the right way. And, in that county, why would anybody just trust them to do it the right way? These are the same people who, when they got the federal materials before the first trial, famously came to court when Alan got up and said, this is loaded with exculpatory evidence. sent one of their prosecutors to say, we've reviewed it, and there's virtually no exculpatory evidence in this. Turns out, I mean, it turns out the ARCA stuff is in there. The Proctor texts are in there. The Brian Albert and Brian Higgins butt dials are in there. Some of the McCabe evidence is in there. The fact that McCabe lied to the feds is in there. The fact that Kerry Roberts told the truth to the feds, indicating that she lied or at least was materially inaccurate to the state grand jury, was in there. You could go on, but in Norfolk County, that doesn't constitute exculpatory evidence.
Right. And then, the judge went through this whole, in her ruling on the motion dismissed, like the new rule, is it 15, whatever the new discovery rules is, which in my estimation, just incorporated all the Supreme Court law and all the rulings that we've had over the years, that it's anything that's helpful to the defense. It does not need to just literally prove any sort of innocence. But when they came back in and talked about the deleted video from the hard drive of what was now inverted and blah, 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 and they asked for something else, and she said, where is the rule for that? And I was like, you just went through in your written ruling how expansive your Rule 15 is, and now you're asking,
14.
How does it help?
14.
Sorry, 14.
No,
How does the condition of the vehicle, that's the murder weapon, how does its condition when it comes into police custody, how is that important, exculpatory, discoverable evidence? And I'm just like banging my head against a wall.
Yeah.
Like, are we living in two different worlds?
Right. Well, Your Honor, the theory of the case is that the cops are either corrupt or careless and whatnot. And so we don't really take them at face value, especially when it's Proctor. And I mean, all you need to know about these people is this: whether you want to just take what the judge says and say, why would we believe the condition of the vehicle when the cops had it? The first photograph of the taillight is 3 or 4 days later. I'm not talking about the picture in the driveway of John O'Keefe's house that either had snow or a busted taillight. That's for the jury to decide. But the first actual, like, this is the clear picture of the taillight is 3 or 4 days later. And the reality is, so Proctor testified that he knew this was a car accident just from talking to Jen McCabe. So, and he's on his way down to get the car. He had already called the tow company, which tells you she's going, like, it's over. I'm taking the car, warrant be damned, and all that stuff.
Right.
So he goes down there. They see the murder weapon, as you call it, and he never does the most basic thing, like pick up this
Right.
and take a freaking picture, which would have metadata and show it's January 29th at whatever time. And then you would say, you know what, if that, and you wipe off the snow, and if you want to put it on video so nobody thinks I'm diddling with it,
To me, that's inexplicable.
it defies all logic that this is a trained homicide investigator who literally does nothing. And then you think about, don't worry about the guy who owns the house. He's not going to, he's a Boston cop. And, I wanted to kill herself, and, don't buy me a gift, buy it for my sister. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden, you don't have to prove who did it, to go back to our point 40 minutes later or whatever, but it becomes plausible, but it all works off the science. I mean, I think
100%. Like,
that's start with the science and work backwards. I think
here's the issue with the science is that, and it's from Aiden's live with the juror. When the juror says, I completely disregarded ARCA, didn't trust what they were saying because I don't know who they were, and then was saying I would have wanted to hear some more evidence about how it wasn't the vehicle hitting the body, and we're like, that is the evidence you heard. They completely discounted it. And now for the judge to still say to when they bring up this issue, we cannot have it like this. We cannot have it where they are not told something, even if it's a independent law enforcement agency, something more, that she still says no, that can't come in. That's horrifying.
It is, but at this point, Jen McCabe has changed the game. And if I'm the defense, I'm coming in guns ablazing Monday and saying the FBI and U.S. attorney is fair game.
Yep.
what she did near the end of
When
her.
you're saying when she said, I heard that agency closed their investigation. That
Yeah, but it was gratuitous. It was not an open door question that was canned. She was ready for it. She went off the rails. Brennan did not try to stop her. So it was deliberate. It was gratuitous. And even worse than that, she basically said, I'm summarizing, obviously, that, I basically gave them the evidence to lead them to close the investigation. And then, so the worst part to me of all this is she stated a conclusion. The investigation is closed, which may or may not be true, depending on, whatever. But the jury just heard from her. She's not a qualified person to say that.
it was my input.
It was up to me. So now I think it is absolutely fair game if the defense wants to says, well, let's talk about the evidence that, had the feds looking into this. And, in terms of like who hired them, the U.S. attorney, as far as ARCA, in terms of, who did you lie to? It was the FBI. In terms of all this other stuff, there's no question that door was busted wide open.
100%.
And the defense should be able to, if they choose, to drive a truck through it. The only question I have is whether Brennan wants that too, because he has, and you hit on this earlier, Bob. In my view, Brennan is delusional in the sense that he wants to go after ARCA as these hacks that are in the tank for the defense. If you really want to pursue that line of questioning, which to me is like running headfirst into a brick wall, I think that's just stupid. But if that's what he wants to do, then what he's going to want to do is mention the U.S. attorney, right? He's going to want to mention all that. So I wonder if he's okay with the defense bringing this up so he can scream at Dr. Wolf again about how corrupt you are and how the U.S. attorney, hired you. And, and then these dirtbag lawyers gave you $20,000 on top of your $500,000 fee after the trial for your travel and food expenses.
If he thinks that, I think he's delusional because he's now wants people to believe that one conspiracy, the one that the defense is putting forward, have all the cops dirty and is absurd, is like, oh, please, what are they trying to spoon feed you? But he wants to tell them that the U.S. attorney is conspiring to
with the defense.
Right.
2 weeks ago, I said, this is all a stunt. This is all an act. This is all part of his effort to try to preclude them from testifying and all this shenanigans, but that ultimately no sane prosecutor, would ever, with a straight face, look at the jury and say, these guys are biased because they were hired in February without knowing who Karen Reed or Alan Jackson was, without knowing what's going on, and said, yeah, we don't think this fits. And then later were made equally available to both parties, and one contacted them that this was all a stunt. He'll never do it. He'll never do it. Then came, a week ago where he's like, again, swinging from the chandeliers and the veins are popping out of his head. And we're all worried that he's going to stroke out in the middle of the courtroom. Right. I still don't think he's going to do it. I can't accept that any prosecutor could be that dense, but I feel less confident about that. But the idea that the jury is going to buy that, and I think to your point, it just opens up the door in terms of what are we talking about? And also it can lead to questions. Now, they didn't ask this about Ian Whiffen, but when it comes to their accident reconstruction people, how much were you paid and who were you hired by? And then if you're going to make that argument, say, who's the bad guy? I mean, not doesn't make the prosecution experts bad people, but they're hired by them. They're paid by them. So where the hell is he going with this?
See, the way that I thought it went with, look, anybody who thought that Brennan was being anything other than completely disingenuous, he wanted ARC out from the get. He knew.
Your Honor, I'm not trying to exclude the witnesses.
Like all that, all his preface bullshit where he'd be saying, oh, like I'm a defense guy. I've been to a few trials. All that bullshit fell on deaf ears with me every single time. He always wanted to get him out. He knew they were never going to get him out. In a state like in Illinois, we can't depose anybody prior to trial. It's such an advantage in states where they allow depositions in criminal trials. I think he was using that in order to see whether or not Wolf would be able to stand up to it. And when, I mean, Wolf handled it like a champion. I mean, Wolf was like unflappable. I was so impressed by him.
Me too. And the jury doesn't see it, but you just have to laugh and say, what a shit show this is. Okay. Wolf is getting cross-examined and he calls him Alan. Now, the jury's not going to know. All right. Oh my God, you're calling him Alan. And then what happens with Whiffen?
Right.
Hank. Yeah, and now again,
that was such a glorious moment, man.
But it was also one of those moments you spoke about earlier where she could have said, all right, Brennan, there's no jury here.
Yeah. No. The fact that she let him scream like a banshee and frankly clown himself and clown the office. I mean, I'd be, if I'm the DA, I'm worried politically, like this is the image I'm sending. I mean, I condone this. And this is somebody I'm already spending, you know, anywhere from 250 to 500,000 extra taxpayer dollars because the people in my office are either incapable and or unwilling. I mean, this is not a good political thing. And then you bring in somebody to act like this.
I mean, he's coming in like when Allie and I tried the Garcia case in Omaha, we knew we could come in. It was a death penalty case. It was a huge case out there. And it was a case where we knew we were coming in scorched earth because that's not my playground. I don't have to be in front of those judges. I don't have to have some kind of relationship for my other clients in terms of those prosecutors. I could come in and just flame throw everything, and I cared not. And, and I'm getting the same sense from him in terms of what he's doing here, in terms of how he's trying this case. Because, look, if I'm looking at it completely objectively, from the first, if I'm to compare the first 8, 9, 10 witnesses, he's doing a better job. He's skipping the whole pre-Buttle case thing that Lally did, trying to get in front of the whole third-party culprit thing. But in terms of, you know, and I thought it was kind of a clever move to put Whiffen right in front of McCabe. You knew it was super transparent why he did that if you know the case. You knew that he was trying to get in front of that 227 Google search and have that, you know, basically in his mind, have the jury thinking, oh, well, that didn't even happen. And I just heard the experts say it didn't happen, so it didn't happen. That's what he's thinking.
I think he did it in the wrong order. He should have.
I do too. He should have had McCabe first and then Whiffen right after. Because like that was always going to be the end of each of their particular examinations. It was always going to be the Google search at the end, and then you would have started Whiffen right there if I were Brennan. But
I agree.
All right, so I want to talk about his use of these videos. Like, look, all of us that believe Karen's innocent, and I'm talking factually innocent, you know, like you have to be mortified by these things because I don't know that they're saying anything in particular that's a death knell to the case, but they're just such a bad look. In the way that she's allowing him to employ these clips, just kind of like plugging them in. It's like watching or watching like a documentary or like listening to an audio book where he's just allowed to randomly stick these things in where he feels that they're going to have the most impact. I mean, have you seen that before where somebody's been able to do that with extrajudicial statements? Not
in the way he's doing it. And again, not being around long enough to know how this was going to play out. In hindsight, I'm assuming they stipulated to allowing them to do it without a witness. I think that's a mistake in hindsight. I would make them call in a witness every time. And now you have a chance to cross-examine the reporter about, was there more? Could there, you know, and that sort of thing. But these little sound bites that are potentially out of context, I've never seen it done this way. And the scary thing is, so far, it's his most effective evidence.
Right.
Say a lot. And they're not good for the defense, but she's not getting convicted because she looks unsympathetic and says potentially dumb things. I mean, it's still, I call it the Jesse Pinkman defense. I'm a Breaking Bad guy. It's still science, bitches. Pardon my French. and the fact that she says whatever she thinks she did, that's not going to trump the science. And so most of these videos, I think, are mostly harmless. The one video where she's allegedly mocking John O'Keefe's mother. That is completely inadmissible and inappropriate. And I can't believe she would allow that in. But I will say this, the last video they played where she said, I pulled up and he was like, a buffalo on the prairie and I expected to find him there. They got to put that in context.
Right.
That's not going to get her convicted, but if left alone, expecting to find him there out of context suggests from the prosecution standpoint, well, you knew he was there because you hit him there. So
yeah.
I don't know what the context of that is, but that's something they're going to have to address either with a broader video or whatever.
So Brennan seems to think, I get the sense that Brennan seems to think that they're not going to be allowed to use other video clips to provide the context that is missing. I don't think that they should have to call her if they're just talking about completion doctrine and getting in the like if he uses half a sentence, getting in the other half a sentence. But there was a comment that the judge made on the last day of trial. She said, well, you'll have your chance when it's your turn. And he's like, oh, I don't think they get to put in self-serving video of the defendant.
Somebody should enlighten Mr. Brennan to a concept which applies in all 50 states, even Massachusetts, still America, called the rule of completeness.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they can take, if they had a video from, the Gretchen Voss interview, I get it. It doesn't mean they can bring in a video from HBO. The only person who can do that is Brennan, like he did with the text messages. Had nothing to do with the chain, but yet I'm bringing in the other ones. But if there is more to that same video that comes before or after that puts context in that, then of course they can do that. And that I assume would be reversible error, assuming it's material and important and could contribute to the verdict. So, but again, he, as a prosecutor, to sit there and say that they're not allowed to do that, the only way to do it is for her to testify because I'm allowed to cut and paste out of context these videos. It's America. Like,
go back to law school
that way. Okay. There's this terrible thing that some people don't like. It's called the Constitution. It's a big thing. If you take civics, you learn about it. And, there are amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 are called the Bill of Rights. They're kind of important, and included in the Bill of Rights, is a right to a fair trial as a matter of due process. And the idea that he's going to be able to cut and paste and pick and choose 5-second clips out of context without the defense, if there is an opportunity, again, I don't know the context of the video, then they have a right to do it. I can tell you this, there is no way, even if the judge rules the way she does, you're not smoking me out of my cave to say, oh, well, Karen has to testify now.
Man, Mark, you and I, this is one thing
you're not even kidding me. I mean, if you think that's smoking, Alan Jackson and David Unetti, you say, oh my God, she better testify.
I am terrified. Look, if you ask any defense attorney, we never, under any circumstances, do I ever want to put my defendant on the stand. It's way too easy for them to say one thing that is misconstrued. Just have one look that one juror's like, that was off. Yeah, I mean, it's just too easy to lose the case with your client up there on the stand. So we never want to do it. And I'm so afraid that it's pushing her closer and closer to having to get up there.
I think
they figured out a way to mitigate it, because I think that they have to be able to get that context in.
Under the rule of completion, they should be able to get things that put it into context. Obviously, like Mark said, not going to different videos in different times. But when we talk about the videos, there were two things that struck me. One was his ridiculous consciousness of guilt argument.
Oh my
God.
God.
Was so absurd. And I'm hoping that during jury instructions or at some point the defense is going to bring up that that is not consciousness of guilt evidence and he should be barred from making that argument in closing. But secondly, and the one that stands out to me because I've talked about it the most is the video that he played of her saying, then the mom leaned over the counter and said, I think it looks like he got hit by a car.
He's imitating her, which she was saying. It's not even her.
Right.
Right.
But here's the thing. Because he spliced 2 parts, there was that video alone, no foundation of what point in time she was talking about.
That's
and,
right.
And Brennan didn't ask Mom the question. Is that the last time you ever saw Karen
Right.
Reed? Is that the last time you ever conversed with Karen Reed? So right now, that video means fucking nothing. It means nothing. It doesn't say whose counter she's leaning over, where, when they're talking about. It means nothing.
But the problem is, does it mean nothing to the jury?
But Brennan shouldn't be allowed to argue it's anything.
I don't think it means nothing, but I don't think it's going to get him over the hurdle. And look, I have no idea what they're going to do. But I know these people. I know the lawyers. I know her. I would be stunned that they would be intimidated in a panic move. Now, they may have other reasons they want her to testify, but I mean, if it were me, it's like, my advice is like, it's not even an option. But consciousness of guilt is real interesting. You talked about it. And this is how bizarre a world this prosecution is. I mean, this man gets up in front of the judge, arguing about the admissibility of all kinds of things with a straight face, saying this. After Karen went to John O'Keefe's house several hours after being released, essentially on a psychiatric suicide watch hold, her father and brother bring her to the house that she had been, in essence, living part-time. Her belongings are there and her car is there. And they go in and they, gather her stuff. Obviously, something's chilly and they're going to leave. So they take her car, the murder weapon. Right. And apparently this is all part of the consciousness of guilt. They drive the car back to her father's house, which is a known location, hidden from nobody. Right. And then they park the car, not in the garage, not under a camouflage, car blanket or something. They park it in the driveway, ass out, meaning the right rear taillight is facing anyone who's going to see it, including
the world to see,
including Michael Proctor and Yuri Panik, who come down there that day and don't take a freaking picture. Okay, so that's in Brennan's world, that's consciousness of guilt. Now, let's compare and contrast.
Yes, exactly.
Tell me if this sounds like consciousness of guilt. 2 people come up to you, and we all know what FBI agents look like, okay? Whether they identify themselves or not, they look like FBI agents. If you
black
and say, "Are you Jennifer McCabe?" "No, I'm Nicole." Okay.
No Bible salesman.
Now, I'm giving her a pass on that one because they didn't identify themselves. But they're like, she's right outside her house. They obviously know who she is. So much so that 10 minutes later, they call her on the phone. Miss McCabe, we're FBI agents. Was that you? Okay, fine. I didn't know who you were.
Fine.
We'd like to talk to you. Okay, come over. Can we talk to you? Yes, I need 10 minutes. The story back then is just like, I need 10 minutes. Not I have to go brush my teeth or go make 5 panic phone calls, but I'm only going to tell you about 2. She goes inside. All right. She has nothing to hide. There's no reason to be concerned. I get it. FBI comes. That could intimidate anyone.
Yeah.
So I understand the phone call to her husband. I think in a normal marriage, which I don't know whether they have one or not, but in a normal marriage, no, it's not a dig. I have no idea.
Right. No, I hear you.
You call your husband and say, there's FBI cops here. I'm letting you know. That doesn't offend me. She calls the Norfolk DA's office. Now, what do you think that conversation is? Why are they here? Why is the FBI here? What's going on? Okay, weird. You call Mrs. O'Keefe.
That's suspicious. That's suspicious.
That's, to me, do you know what's going on? Like, that's phishing. That's not to inform her they're there. That's to say, like, is something going on? Okay,
exactly.
Weird. All right, so then you call the famous Kerry Roberts, because they've become best friends.
To know, did she stop at you first, and what'd they say?
Have you spoken to them? Are you aware of this? What's going on? Remember, she's telling them everything.
everything.
And then Brian Albert,
Right.
who is on all those texts about, remember, tell him the guy never went in the house. Exactly. That was Brian Albert. Exactly. He's involved in, Kerry didn't make a strong statement. She made a weak statement or whatever the words were. And then she comes out and they say, did you call anyone? Yeah. Who'd you call? Well, I made 2 phone calls. They give her 1,001 warnings. She still says, I made 2 phone calls. They interview her for 5 minutes and she says, I don't want to do this anymore. They leave. And then her husband basically potentially saves her, liberty. Who knows whether it's material or not. Says, what are you doing? Like, you need to tell them. And then she tells him, well, I actually lied to you and I called all these people. So I ask you, which is consciousness of guilt? Taking my car to my dad's house and leaving it in plain view, or lying to the FBI about my identity, making panic phone calls, lying about making panic phone calls, and then saying after 5 minutes, yeah, we're done. I don't want to talk to you, even though I have nothing to hide.
And I'm just trying to help everybody.
Okay,
I'm just a soccer mom.
That is cut and dry consciousness of guilt.
And I would take that even a step further because, now taking us back to when Brennan's arguing that, now it's the murder weapon. And when we talk about consciousness of guilt, the whole inverted video, not taking a picture when it first comes into evidence, everybody, lying about the time that the tow truck driver picked up so that
Scrivener's error, even though none of the numbers are anywhere near each other, by the way.
No, right.
So in other words, that's not a Scrivener's error. That's
right.
That's called a lie, right?
Yeah, that's a flat out lie.
And it's just like, and for the judge to even to just not see how compelling all of that put together is shocking, and that screams of consciousness of guilt. And when he's making that argument, I'm like, how is he in like any sort of good faith, just like you said, with a straight face, saying the car she drove in, this proves her consciousness that she knows she's guilty because she left with it. She left with the very car she drove in.
They tried at the first trial, if you remember, at some point she called a lawyer when she knew like she's getting contacted by the state police. They're on to her. And like any sane human being should do at that time, she calls a lawyer. They got up with a straight face, and this is not Brennan's problem. He gets a pass for this one, and argued that we should be able to admit into evidence as consciousness of guilt that she called a lawyer when the cops had reached out and said, we're doing something. And I'm thinking, well, you could argue it's consciousness of guilt, but you're going to have, if she's convicted, you're going to have to try the case again, because again, that pesky Constitution gets involved. And honestly, it's like, I don't know what these people are thinking.
Where they went to law school.
Do they have trial advocacy? Do they have training? What are you doing? Like, that is the most basic. You can't do that.
You can't do it.
And they just do it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So how long do you think this thing's going to go if you had a best guess?
I think the prosecution case goes quicker than last time.
Yeah,
clearly. Lally was, oof. But I think the defense is more robust this time in terms of evidence and whatnot. So probably 2 months. That's what they seem to guess, and that seems about right. But also, they shut down before 4:00 every day.
I know, it's crazy. I love it. For me, it's 3:00. We're done streaming, so I'm like, it's like a holiday every day. But yeah, I snuggle into Bob Alessi like he's a security blanket, just knowing that he's going to be doing the direct of Wolf and Rensler, because that testimony just has to be so clear in terms of what they are saying, what their opinion is. Because when I watched Ronnie, and I think Ronnie was on Aiden's show, and I think he popped up somewhere else. I heard him a couple of different times.
Is that really the juror? Was that really him?
That's what my mods are saying. That's him. That was him personally there.
Yeah. So I had to take to heart what he was saying, and I'm assuming these are all highly skilled litigators who have tried a ton of cases. They've heard him, so they have to know all right, these are the things.
They mentioned it, babe. They mentioned it in their motion when they asked the judge to reconsider allowing them to call them, say that they were hired by the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office. They specifically said that one of the jurors came out and said the jurors were confused.
Oh, I know
about
that.
who they were.
Oh, I know that. Like, I mean, to me, that point is one of my biggest pet peeves about this case. Having that kind of float out in the ether without giving the jury that information and stripping that strength of those witnesses away from the defense is such utter bullshit. I mean, because that's what it does. Like when we hire hired guns, that's what they are. They can get on the stand and on the cross, they're going to ask them how much they were paid. And, you know, everybody has that perception of experts, right? That they X each other out. They're all hired guns. They all say what they need to say so there's no gravitas to what they're saying. I don't get any weight.
I agree. But to me, it's like a non-starter at this point. Jennifer McCabe blew the lid off.
I agree.
Hired them. And I don't know how, again, they have to make a strategic choice. Do we want to throw it all out there? But if they want to put it out there, I don't know how. Nobody objected. It's out there.
Right.
It's fair game. And I don't know how, if that's what they want to do, they don't come in first thing Monday morning and say, we need to talk about this because, and it's not just for ARCA. I mean, they need to do it now because, you know, there's an FBI investigation. You already know Kerry Roberts, you know, was interviewed. Jen McCabe was interviewed. You see a pattern here? You think it might apply to some of these other people coming down the pipipeline?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I need a ruling now, and
100%.
Nothing else. I make a mistake, a legal mistake.
Right. I mean, like they've pretty much abandoned the concept of, you know, trying to not let the jury know that this is the second trial. I think
they put the lid off that. Like that, yeah. Why are we even running that? Yeah. But she's still trying to protect it after the fact, even though everybody's talked about the first trial. They get called up and we went back to proceeding, but that's,
and now they're calling it a hearing at another hearing. So I think she even had to move further. So Jen's nefarious 507 call to Coco. I don't remember hearing about that the first time around. So she says, please chat about the 507 call. Was it giving Nicole and Brian a heads up that she's going to stall Karen Reed a bit or going to go back to Meadows, but let them know to get ready. Shit's coming down soon. This was new, right? This 507.
This was new. And, you know, the evidence was that it was a 38-second call. But of course, Jennifer McCabe doesn't remember making it. And if she did make it, it didn't connect because I didn't speak to her. And if I did make it, it was nothing. I mean, it's just kind of like, you never mind the man behind the curtain kind of thing. It doesn't matter. But the problem is it kind of does. And it kind of does a lot.
Yeah.
Because if you go ahead, you know, her whole point was nobody in the house knew anything. And 507 is very shortly after Karen is having her panic attack, calling these people. And, you know, you call Nicole Albert at 507. And if they know, I mean, you can speculate all you want. What might she be saying? Like, you know, shit, something, Karen is freaking out. And, you know, it's interesting because at 507, where does Karen go? She goes to Jen McCabe's house. Why does she go to Jen McCabe's house? Because Jen McCabe told her to.
Right.
I don't think anyone's believing that she just showed up.
No. And if I'm the defense, this is another example, and I think a list of many in which I'm saying she is the puppet master. She 100%. Is in control, and that
steering the ship.
Steering the ship. And what's going to be interesting is, and they didn't do this through Jen McCabe, but you know, some of this was on the internet over the last several months. There's other phone calls at 6:07 or thereabouts, right after the 911 call to Nicole again. And you can actually hear them because they're on the back of like Karen's message that was running. And you can hear Jen McCabe whispering. So she's leaving a message or talking
to someone. Right.
And she's telling the jury, I never talked to anyone in the house, never said anything. Nobody knew. I woke them up. And the evidence appears not to suggest it. And the problem that Jen McCabe has is, why would you give her the benefit of the doubt when she's, to me, clearly lying or conveniently forgetting, which is just another word for lying, about many things that she told the police. She testified under oath to in a grand jury. She testified under oath to at a prior trial. She's conveniently, contriving and fixing her testimony to fit the new timeline. And oh, by the way, she lied to the FBI without a reason to do so. So why would anybody credit her without corroboration of anything that she says?
Right. And in one breath, she says, when Alan Jackson went through the whole, well, there was a man grasping for life on the front lawn. Is there an EMT anywhere? Can you think of, can you think of anyone? And she's like, I wasn't even thinking about them, but you called them. Between hanging up with 911 and rushing over to give aid, you actually called them again. So you clearly they were on your mind.
You thought about it at 5:07.
And you thought about it at whatever it was, 6:00, whatever.
In many ways, it's even worse than that. I mean, she says, there's a man in the snow. And again, well, it's a police officer and a police officer's lawn. We all know, and she's from a police family.
Right. Everyone knows. You say officer down. Everyone knows.
And rather than just say, if she's lying, she's lying. But if you're going to lie, like pick the better lie than,
right.
Not being a liar by trade. I don't know. But I mean, if we're playing this exercise, why not just say, you know what? I never thought of it. I should have. I didn't. But no, that's not how her brain works. She's going to push back, and you're not going to make me look stupid, which makes her look stupid, and basically says, what's the difference? I didn't tell them it was a police officer because they're going to come the same anyway.
Right.
I mean, and that's just a dumb thing to say. And then you see her out there, she's calm, cool, collected. She's calm, cool, collected on the 911 call. But then you're supposed to believe out of nowhere, after she just told you, I know nothing happened in the house. Everything's fine. And she tells him, I know it was a car accident because Karen said I hit him. And, of course, the cops don't document that. But the testimony is going to be from Brian and Nicole Albert. They're not going to change their testimony from the first trial. Is that when Jennifer McCabe came in there, she came in screaming, out of control, inconsolable, and woke up everyone there except the, missing dog. Who, by the way, the dog is unaccounted for the whole day, which is really weird because,
weird.
I saw your dog earlier and I'm a dog guy. I'm a dog guy. I assume there are at least a few jurors who are, dogs have to go out. They have to pee. They have to poop. They need to eat. They hear people in the house. They make noise. When Jennifer McCabe storms in there, there's no dog noise. Weird. Okay. All these people then come in the house. No dog. Now the dog would be up. Dog's got to go out. Anybody take the dog out? Did anybody ever testify they saw the dog going out, peeing, pooping, eating, barking, whining? No, it's as if the dog went down the memory hole. Just doesn't exist.
Do you think they're going to come up with Allie McCabe, like a police station where she brought this stray dog that she found in, or a police station she called, or a?
I think the prosecution is going to take Allie McCabe and Colin Albert and just throw them out and not call at all. I think once they got their third party, ruling as it relates to Colin, I think they're like, get them the hell out of here. And why don't you go vacation in California for the next 2 months kind of thing? I mean, what's the point of even?
I mean, that's one of those coincidences that really sticks to me, that there's this missing dog and she finds a stray dog. Right. It's like,
and took it to, look, I don't know. I agree. It sounds weird, but I don't think he's calling either one of them.
No, I agree. And the concept of the dog, and I talked about this the other day when that testimony was going on. My dog, he's a 75-pounder, and anything that goes on outside, if he's laying in the living room and he's looking through an entire different room and he sees a squirrel
waking up the neighborhood.
Oh my God, he's scratching on the door. He's maniacal. If I had anybody talking outside of our front lawn, he would be going nuts on the front door trying to get out. He's a very friendly dog. He's not, he just wants to go lick people's faces. That's what he wants to do. He is a very lovable dog. And the line of questioning as to Jen McCabe, which I thought was powerful, low key powerful by Alan, was just the familiarity of a dog going both ways, both the dog to the person and the person to the dog. Anybody that comes into our house knows that Nanook has a real problem with jumping up and trying to lick people's faces. Every kid that any of our kids bring over, they all know. Any of our friends that come over, they all know. We're always saying down, but that's just what he does. You know what that dog's habit is. And she's over there all the time. For her to be saying that she doesn't know how Chloe normally responds, it was all just so disingenuous. And it was just like you said, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts with her. They just have to be able to line it up in terms of, can you trust anything that she said? And it all falls back to that brilliant beginning in terms of the woman lied to the feds.
And the way I described it the other day was, even if you have some people who just can't get to the fact that, she's deliberately perjuring herself, it really doesn't matter, because the way I would describe it is, with all of her inconsistencies, all of her failed memories, all of her contradictions, all of her contrived self-serving stuff, she's not worthy of belief. That's the way I would phrase it. She's not reliable. And you could be not credible by being a liar, or just somebody who can't recall with any degree of confidence, if you're a juror, to trust them. Either way, she's just not reliable. She's telling you, I don't even remember making a Google search. And if you believe that, even then, if you accept that that's true testimony, do you have any faith that she can remember anything? Because she seems to remember a lot of things that are very convenient for the prosecution.
But very selective memory, that one.
And the lashing out, like the story about the federal investigation, and I knew she said she did it, and they found 45 pieces of taillight. That's not an accident. That's like brewing in her head. That's the gerbil running on the thing, waiting for the moment when you open the door to pounce. And it's just too contrived. She's not credible. She's not worthy of belief.
That's the hard thing about lying on the stand, because it's like when I went into the practice of law and we started trying cases, I was always of the mindset, my father's a defense attorney, and I always thought that the trappings of the court, that the weight of the moment when you're in there made it really, really hard for people to lie on the stand. And I learned very, very quickly that certain people have absolutely no problem whatsoever sitting in that seat with the light shining on them, the trappings of the court, the weight of the moment, and they just lie with no problem.
Absolutely. If I were summing up on McCabe, you talk about the grand jury, there was people just like you. She took the same oath, doesn't match this, it doesn't match that. But I think in this case, the most real life compelling example is the FBI interview, because she did get 1,001 warnings. She admitted that. She knew, if I lie to them, I could be charged with a crime. We can't call it a federal crime because, we're not allowed. But the point is, I would say she told you, like, it's indisputable, knowing that it was a crime to lie and that she could be punished, lied.
Right.
So if she's willing to do that, okay, about something that's so inoffensive and has no bearing on her, why would you just assume she's not willing to take an oath in front of you and do the same exact thing? And so much more now about her and da-da-da-da-da. And I don't know anyone, being fair to the process, would go to the jury room and say, whatever she says is just going to be credible unless it's corroborated by indisputable evidence. If she told you the day of the week was Thursday, if I'm a juror, I don't want to credit that unless I can look at my watch and confirm it. It's just there's too many problems in relying on her. That's just, and that that triggers, offends a lot of people publicly, but that's the reality. And all you have to tell those people is what we talked about earlier, which is, forget that's Karen Reed case. Forget that McCabe. It's just witness X. Yeah. If I told any single person listening witness X did this, this, and this, I guarantee you 100% of the people would say, I don't believe it. I don't believe her.
100%. And Alan's got like in summation, that's exactly what Alan has to do with her. Because I mean, at the end of the day, for the Commonwealth, she's their key witness. I mean, who do they have that they're going to be able to put on that stand moving forward in terms of them trying to prove up their case is more important than that woman was.
The accident reconstruction. That's it.
I mean, and is Welcher, like, are we concerned about him? I mean, like I'm assuming they're pulling Paul out, right? I mean, are they going to have Paul testify at all?
I don't know how they could.
I mean,
he's on the witness list.
I mean,
oh my God,
Brennan clearly. I mean, I'm just going by tea leaves and how they're trying the case, but in the pretrial hearings and the ARCA stuff, he seems terrified of again allowing due process, which is simply the defense expert to actually say, well, yeah, I looked at their expert's report and they're wrong, and here's why. And I think what he's terrified of is because of the first trial, Lally said, well, you didn't look at this, you didn't look at that. And although they said we didn't need to, this time they're going to say, I looked at every single thing your experts looked at to conclude it was an accident, and not so much.
Yeah, sorry.
I think that's the issue that he has. So,
yeah, I am 100%, and I've been screaming it for. I mean, in this case, lives and dies in terms of the defense. You attack the timeline because that timeline just does not make any sense. And through Jen McCabe's own words, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. Logic does not work in her equation at all.
I'm terrified if I'm the prosecution with all these other witnesses that are with Jen McCabe. I'm talking Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Matthew McCabe, like that group of people, because they can't really gain any ground. It's whether they can hold the line,
right,
not get damaged further, because like Brian Albert has nothing affirmative to say towards Karen Reed's guilt. It's just, I mean, so if they even call him, I mean, look, they could do this an interesting way and say, we're not calling any of these people. But the one I'd be worried about the most is Matthew McCabe, because curiously enough, whose testimony basically tracks Jennifer McCabe's almost to a T about stuff that he was present for anyway. Okay. Who's the other witness who says, I saw Higgins's Jeep when the three kids said, no Jeep? Matthew McCabe. Who's the other one who says, I looked out the window and saw, Karen creeping up? Matt McCabe. I mean, he's really the only one. Yep. And he just happens to be married to her.
Right.
So,
right.
And he's the one in the text exchange who's saying, tell him the guy didn't go in the house. Oh, look, we haven't even heard this yet. Their cops are digging through the snow at the Asian house. I'll go drive by and take a picture. This is not normal behavior for people who are just concerned about what happened to their friend.
And I mean, at the end of the day, like you're posing that question after it all comes out. And I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of the entire Bowden defense thing that's going to be coming in droves. It's like
we have Mike Proctor, really. I mean, that's how bad this is.
For 2 hours,
mention Mike Proctor.
Like Proctor is just the gift that keeps on giving. You know what I mean? Like that. That is all coming down the pike, and you just ask the jury to ask themselves the question when they're going to be able to pick apart each one of these individuals and all of the weird little things that they did that night and that morning, and just ask yourselves
and why. Afterwards destroying homes.
Why would they be doing that? I don't know what the answer is, but ask yourselves that. Why?
I know. And I think the bow on top of that, or the bow to wrap the present in, is when you go to that family chat, okay, not the one with Kerry where like none of us can process this. The argument in summation is you look at that entire family chat from whatever day it started till when it ended, sometime in early February. And it's not even so much what you see in that family chat, which is really disturbing in terms of like, wow, this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't see privately. And what you don't see privately is grieving John O'Keefe. You don't even see his name. You see the guy didn't go.
Guy.
Okay. You know, Kerry's telling them everything. You see giddiness. You see, you know, emojis and exclamation points. Outside the family chain is where you see, oh my God, oh my God.
I'm
And you
grieving.
have to wonder, is that part of the tractor beam? It is May the 4th to pull in Star Wars, to pull in Kerry Roberts, right? To see, can we, you know, make her do it the way we want to do it? And then when you look at all her statements after McCabe gets her clutches, they're all hand in hand until Roberts is confronted by the feds and decides, you know, I'm not taking a header for this nonsense.
Right.
Which, you know, to me, by the way, the look on Jen McCabe's face the other day, if you saw it, I think she was learning in real time that Kerry told the FBI, that actually looked real to me, like shit. I didn't know that.
Right.
Because they
No,
also,
you know, and Kyle Sharkey makes a point, and I wondered this at the time. When Whiffen was on the stand, he says that he drove the day before, and Brennan objected about not wanting to get that in. What do you think that was all about?
it looks ridiculous. It's all, but you're afraid of what he's going to say. He's going to say it doesn't fit. I mean, what else could you conclude? I mean, unless he's, I mean, look, one thing about Brennan, but because I don't think he'd do it in front of the jury, he is the best gaslighter I've ever seen in my life. He is
Man,
good at it. I mean, so, you know,
especially
maybe
when you know what his background is.
Right.
The dude's a like mob lawyer. Like, you know who he is. Yeah, he's unbelievable, man.
But unless he was trying to suggest that, well, I don't want him to answer it because I must protect the integrity of the courtroom because I know that's not evidence that the jury should consider, even though it helps me because I'm very concerned about, you know, the fair trial that Karen gets. But I find that hard to believe in that moment that that's what that was.
Yeah, he's something else. He's something else. All right, man. We've kept you for nearly 2 hours on a Sunday. I am so grateful to you for giving us your valuable time. I always love hearing from you. Tell the folks where they can find you over on the Twitter machine
Or anywhere else.
Mostly there at Bederow Law, just BEDEROW Law. That's where I do most of my stuff.
Well,
And
we love you over here, man. You're a gentleman and a scholar. We'd love to have you back.
sure.
You're just you're just a trove of information, and I love the way your brain works too. So
Yeah,
it's great, man.
It was fun, and I just looked over at the TV screen and I see that the Cleveland Cavaliers lost game 1.
Hey, look, I'm rooting for your boys. I hope you guys knock the Knickerbockers right out and continue your run to your 19th banner hanging from the rafters, man. It would be pretty cool for y'all.
Yeah,
because us in Chicago were, I mean, you know, the Cubs are playing all right, so we'll see what's going on there. But it's been bleak for a long, long time here in Chicago, Mark. It's been for such a big market, it's super depressing.
It's been bad, but you still have Michael Jordan. And
we'll always have Jordan.
We're gonna top that, so you'll always have that.
You're the best, man. You're the best. Enjoy your evening and have a blast watching that game tomorrow night, brother.
Okay, take care.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Brandy pointed out that now the comment's gone, but that when Jen testified when she went in, that Brian Albert was like John who? Like they don't even know, you know, like, oh wait, John who?
Wait, he's that guy. You know,
he's that guy, right?
That's
And then
that
I was good.
That-
I was going to try to get to some of these other questions, but you let him off the hook. So, and Creed, thanks for your generosity. This was before we let everyone know, don't do super stickers. But by the way, did you see U.S. Attorney Ed Martin posted 5 minutes ago? He's getting rid of the Lewis Brady lists and will be standing up to judges who allow it. All right.
Not see that.
Me neither.
Not see that.
Anaya Meadows, thank you. Hello from Indiana. Taking a break from tunnel vision. Awesome to see you three together. And Jay Coop.
Hey, before y'all start dipping out, please give a like share, a subscribe. We'd love to have you over here. We think we have pretty good content.
Yeah, and there's some other questions we have flagged, like actual questions about the case that we're about to hop into too. So don't leave just yet. I really need your opinion on the Commonwealth changing its theory 4 times. It's crazy to me that they have done that. I mean, it is crazy that the Commonwealth keeps changing their theory, including their theory about the time that this happened, because they've got all the evidence that Karen Reed's almost all the way back at Meadows. I don't know how they're going to put it together with that.
I mean, because the problem for them is she connects to his Wi-Fi. I mean, that's definitive in terms of when she's there.
Right.
You don't connect to the Wi-Fi. Like, you can hear her in the garage when she connects. You can hear the noise of her clacking whatever shoes she's wearing, walking through the garage, and she connects to the Wi-Fi.
Right.
I mean, their timeline is a mess. I mean, like, they have every opportunity to just attack the hell out of that timeline that they've created, because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's too many other things that they could point out, because what they need is just a beautiful demonstrative chalk during closing where they're just lining up that timeline and just showing the jury how it doesn't work in conjunction with the science. And that when you have those two elements, it should be a done deal. But
it should be. Hopefully they believe the science. And Gen X Girl Lawyer, thank you. Great live tonight with Bederow. I love his perspective. And then there was some questions from some of our members. We've got Ipsy Dixit. Did the defense present any evidence last trial about the lack of salt inside the taillight hub? Shouldn't that be present if the taillight was broken at this as the state alleged? I thought there was some mention of it this trial. I don't remember if it came up last trial or not, but it's a very good
yeah, I mean, especially, when they're salting and plowing, if you live in a snow state, that salt is very invasive.
And Amanda asks, is it strategic of Jackson to keep calling them another agency or agents so they can say ARCA works with an agency to subtly let the jury know? It is not strategic. This is because that's how the judge wants it to be referred to as. They're not allowed to say federal FBI, federal agents. She doesn't even want them to say agents. She wants them to call them an agency or law enforcement. May he still be able to tie that together when they hear, like, maybe to say another agency? I don't even know if the judge is going to allow him to say that much.
Well, I mean, Mark's absolutely right. I mean, first thing in the morning, they need to be storming the castle and saying, look, we need to address this, because in our estimation, the door's been kicked open,
Right. And she misled the jury.
Right.
Right. And Bob and I still think that Brennan, if he goes too hard on cross-examination of ARCA, could kick the door open as well. Lisa says, do you think the jury understands the feds were involved this time? Because I don't think they understood that last trial. I think based on the another agency, I do think that they're getting the sense that was likely a federal agency. But, and plus there was a couple uses of the words agents. And agents typically those are federal agents. Otherwise, you'd call them a cop, an officer, detective, whatever the case may be. So I think they might have gotten the sense by now. And sorry, Little Miss Red Velvet, we didn't get to ask while Mark was still here. I think that the state's going to do it. If they got a hung jury again, I still feel like the Commonwealth would try again.
It's like standing in line for 2.5 hours for a roller coaster in an amusement park, and then dipping when you're I think they would absolutely keep trying the case. I mean, it's just, even though you would think at some point in time that somebody in that office would come to the realization that they're never going to be able to prove the case. This is just one of those cases that lives in reasonable doubt. It just does. I cannot think of a more perfect case that was high profile and in recent memory that lives in reasonable doubt like this case does. It just does. And that's the thing with the defense here. You hope that there was a shift, and I think that there was, from, David Yannetti, who I love, leaning in, saying Karen Reed was framed. You knew they were digging into that in the first trial. Alan Jackson took a vastly different approach this time. He certainly brought up the things which I hope he's going to employ the way that Mark was suggesting, where you're gonna rely on attacking the timeline and the science, and then you're going to have all these tasty tidbits about these folks in there, where if you need something to hang your hat on, well, maybe give a peek to those folks over there and think about why they were lying and why they were doing so much shady shit. And that's a place where maybe you can hang your hat. We don't have to prove a damn thing to you, but that's a good place to look.
Is that really Be in Trouble 31, the one that made the video of the taillights and
It
all
is,
that, or
it
somebody's
is.
using his name?
No, I think is that you? We loved your videos over here, Be in Trouble. If that is
Yeah.
you, we
Yeah.
thought they were great. We thought they were great.
And Al Dente asked, please, was Brennan shaking his head at Bev ex parte? We did talk about that earlier, and said it sure as hell looked like it.
Hey, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck.
Right. Mark is not, you know, he's got to walk a line for challenging the integrity of a judge, you know, openly criticizing the integrity of a judge. You know, but we all sort of spoke to that. I mean, the guy shook his head and then the judge seemed to be writing something down, but
It looks like a duck and quacks like a duck. I mean, it is what it is. We all have eyes. I don't know what other explanation can you come up for it, I guess, is a better
it
question.
is Be in Trouble. So if anyone hasn't seen, if you go to the YouTube's Be in Trouble 31, he's done a lot of video about testing he's done on the tail light, what the tail light looks like when it's broken, what color it looks like.
Oh, the most recent one, he's got like a I don't know, like a fake human arm that has a bone in it, and he's got the bone out there, and he's having the tail light. He's backing up, going like whatever the speed is, 29 miles an hour or whatever it is, 24 miles an hour, and he has it hitting the arm, and you can see the bone because it's translucent, so you can see where the bone cracked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everything he does is great. He puts a lot of time and effort into it, so I highly recommend you go check it out. It's really interesting stuff.
Mandy put it up there. So Kathy was saying, why at the hospital would Peggy be asking why Karen was there? She didn't even know anything at that point. It's a very good question, because apparently all she allegedly knew at that time was Karen had left him, you know, left him at a party, and then this is what, you know, this is what happened. That can't be enough to leave him at a party of people that you know, that are like friends of his. So I don't know what she thought, you know, right then and there. And then Marcia Braga asks, if they have DNA from 3 males on John's shoe, can they still test all those guys? The defense can't really do anything, can't compel. I mean, unless they got a private investigator to go and, you know, pick trash, or, I mean, they'd have to like find something that these guys touched or licked or whatever the case may be. But
follow them into a diner, just grab their
Right.
glass. You know, I mean, same shit that the law enforcement does when they're trying to snag some DNA and they're being sneaky about it.
So Karen had a question for Mark, but we'll try. I mean, yeah, Karen Kruger v. Hohen, but we'll try to answer it. If Karen went into the house to look for John, even if he died by accident, do you think they would have killed Karen as well? I mean, I don't
know.
Right.
I mean, if you're thinking, if your brain is in that concept of you don't leave a witness alive, who knows?
Right.
I mean, you know,
Nobody's
it's
gonna know.
I mean, if you're there and you're like, well, if they went so far as to, you know, knowingly let them die out there, and, you know, in order to protect themselves, because it's like that concept of, you know, because it is hard to get, I think, 12 jurors to a place where they're going to believe that many people could keep a secret. But the you know, the X factor is every one of them has such a huge amount to lose. You know, I mean, like at some point, you know, that's why none of these folks are ever going to cave ever. You know, so I mean, it's one of those things where there has to be some kind of additional evidence that would pop up in order to really kind of to seal the deal. And whether or not the Fed investigation's over, I mean, who knows? You know, the Feds aren't announcing that to anybody. That's not how they operate.
Right.
They're beholden to no one.
Right. All right. Well,
All right. So that was awesome. We love Mark. It was great. I'm so thankful he came.
We love
on.
having all you cupcakes in here, all you 13th jurors in here, people
All y'all,
from the
all
lawyer,
y'all.
you know.
We dig
Yes.
y'all. And we'll be live streaming like we do every day. We'll be on bright and early if you're Central Time. We're 7:45. Allie and I will be here digging into, what is it, day 9? I think it's day 9.
Yep.
And we're supposed to get a full week trial this week. So yeah, may the 4th be with you. To all of you guys out there, we adore you. Like I said, please remember to like, share, subscribe. It really helps us grow out there.
No
And
chance Proctor's going to flip unless he wants to, go to jail.
not a shot. It would be amazing, though. It would be amazing. that would be amazing if that happened. But don't hold your breath. I mean, he's got nothing to gain unless he's just really trying to give them a giant FU, because it is really, really tough to fire a cop. I mean, you saw how long it took. The police, in terms of their labor union, cop labor union is very robust. They fight like hell to keep these cops on. They work out the best deals. If it looks like it's going to be a situation where they're not going to be able to keep their guy employed, they'll work out something that they think is in the best interest of their guy. So it's just, I mean, it's tough, and it says a lot when somebody gets shit
Fired.
killed from being
Yep.
a cop.
All right. Well, we'll see. Hopefully, all of you tomorrow. Or
on your police work there, Lou.
Mods, we thank you. I'm sure it was
Thank you.
this is our biggest crowd ever, so I'm sure you guys were working like furious little elves back there behind the scenes, making our chat the best of the land, which we know that it is. Day in, day out, we got the best chat out there. So thank you guys so much. Mandy, Tracy, we love you. Thank you so much. Grifting. So we look forward. Remember, please like, share, subscribe. It helps us grow.
all right.
Because without
guys
you all,
tomorrow.
I'm just an old man.
Talking a lot of shit.